Imagine spending 6 months in the Rocky Mountains with no bathroom, no shower, no deodorant, and no washing machine. You sleep beside a fire, wear buckskin for weeks, and spend your days sweating, trapping, and hunting. So how did mountain men actually stay clean? The reality of bathing water takes fuel to heat. Fuel takes time to gather. Time is the one thing a trapper never has. So daily baths were rare, not because trappers didn't care, but because survival came first. A man might wash his face and hands at a creek each morning. A full bath waited for warmer water, or for the one event that made it worth the effort, rendezvous. Compare that to the people who already lived on this land. Multiple native cultures of the era bathed regularly, some daily, even breaking river ice in winter to do it. So why didn't trappers do the same? Different economies of time. A Shoshone or Crow camp had a fixed base, family labor, and warm lodges. A trapper worked alone or in a small brigade, moving daily, racing the trapping season. There was no outhouse either, just a spot well away from camp and any creek or spring. So the water supply stayed clean. Corn husks, leaves, moss, or a handful of snow served as the only substitute for paper. In deep winter, the whole task turned brutal. Dropping buckskin trousers in sub-zero wind, bare skin exposed to frostbite was reason enough to put it off, as long as the body allowed. The beard myth. Here's where Hollywood lied to you. The image of the mountain man with a foot-long beard and matted hair, largely invented decades later by painters like Frederick Remington, who never met a real trapper, and by Wild West shows chasing spectacle. Contemporary sources tell a different story. The novelist George Frederick Ruxton, who lived among trappers in the 1840s, described one man's face as cleanly shaved after the fashion of the mountain men. Artist Alfred Jacob Miller, who painted trappers from life at the 1837 rendezvous, shows most of them clean-shaven or with only a mustache, rarely a full beard. Why bother shaving in the wilderness? 3 reasons. First, hygiene. A beard gave lice more territory to colonize, and lice were miserable enough on the scalp alone. Second, fashion. Beards weren't stylish in America or Europe until the 1850s. Third, trade. Most trappers' business partners were native tribes, and many native cultures viewed a full beard with contempt, calling bearded white men dog face. A clean face meant better trade and sometimes a better chance with a native wife's family. That doesn't mean every trapper stayed neat. Journals from the era also describe men returning from months alone looking genuinely ragged. Hair, combs, and a surprising vanity. Long hair was common, but not always neglected. Captain Benjamin Bonneville, writing about trappers he encountered, described hair carefully combed and sometimes braided. A trapper alone in a beaver camp still found a moment to run a comb through his hair or plait it to keep it out of his face while skinning a pelt. Soap, razors, and the rendezvous. Soap and shaving kits weren't something trappers grew or made easily in camp. They were trade goods, carried out from St. Louis by the pack train each spring, sold and bartered at rendezvous alongside gunpowder, knives, and tobacco. Picture it. A trapper rides in from a winter alone in the Wind River Range. He trades beaver pelts for a bar of soap, a straight razor, powder, and lead. Then he walks to the river. Off comes a buckskin shirt, stiff with a season of sweat and wood smoke. He scrubs it in the current, wrings it out, drapes it over a willow branch to dry. He shaves off months of stubble with a blade sharpened on a stone carried in a pouch at his belt. For a few days, surrounded by hundreds of other trappers and native traders, he is, briefly, clean. That's what rendezvous really was, not just a market and a drinking bout, but a hygiene reset. Historian James Beckworth described the scene as mirth, dancing, racing, shooting, trading, A rare window of civilization dropped into the wilderness, and washing was part of it. Dirty clothes, bigger problem. A body can be scrubbed in a river in 10 minutes. Buckskin cannot. Deer hide stiffens, cracks, and smells differently than wool or cotton. It doesn't dry the same way, and heavy washing can ruin it. So trappers often wore the same shirt for weeks, patched it, greased it against water, and accepted the smell as the cost of the material. Wool garments and blankets fared a little better, beaten against rocks to knock out dirt. But a true wash and dry cycle out on the trail was a luxury, not a routine. Lice, odor, and daily reality. Body odor was simply accepted. There was no daily alternative, and everyone around you smelled the same way. Lice were a fact of frontier life, in cities and in the mountains alike. Trappers picked them from seams of clothing at the fire, boiled garments when they could spare the water, and, as we've seen, shaved to deny lice a second home on the face. Lice weren't just an itch. In the tight, unwashed conditions of a winter camp, infestations could carry typhus, a fever that killed men faster than any grizzly. One trick trappers actually used: they spread their infested clothing over an anthill and let the ants strip the lice and eggs from the seams. Teeth and frontier remedies. Dental care didn't disappear either. Trappers cleaned their teeth with frayed willow twigs, chewed at one end until the fibers splayed into crude bristles, or scrubbed with a pinch of wood ash or salt as an abrasive. A rotten tooth in the backcountry was a real danger, with no dentist for hundreds of miles. So men pulled bad teeth themselves or had a trail companion do it with pliers from a possibles bag, then rinsed the wound with whiskey. Grease served hygiene too, not just soap. Rendered buffalo or bear fat was rubbed into skin and hair to seal out cold and cut wind chapping, doing double duty as a rough moisturizer. When manufactured soap ran out between rendezvous, some men turned to yucca root, pounded into a frothy lather southwestern tribes already used, a direct hygiene technique borrowed from native neighbors rather than invented from scratch. Straight razors also needed maintenance. A whetstone carried in a small belt pouch kept the blade sharp enough for weekly use, since a dull razor on days-old stubble did more damage than good. Infected wounds. A cut mattered more than a bear ever did. No doctor for 500 miles. An untreated wound could kill faster than any animal in the mountains. In 1823, a grizzly near the Grand River tore Hugh Glass open from scalp to leg. His companions left him for dead. Weeks later, crawling along the riverbank, Glass found his wounds crawling with maggots and let them stay. They ate the infected flesh and kept the rot from spreading. He lived another decade. Other trappers cauterized deep cuts and snake bites by burning a pinch of gunpowder directly on the open flesh. Broken skin got a salve of rendered soap and sugar, or bear oil mixed with the herb cestrum. When nothing else was on hand, a wound was packed with a dirty shirt and buckskin thongs, tied tight and left to whatever luck the mountains allowed.